CPOE lab test results. Once a lab test has been ordered, the results can be applied in the system. Now, lab results can come in the form of structured data or non-structured data. Structured data would be the actual numeric values in the context of minimum maximum ranges or even positive negative, whereas non-structured data is in the form of a fax or a scanned document, such as a diagnostic report that includes the results. Results can be entered either manually by a human or auto-posted through an electronic interface. Now, if you are using the interface, there is an import log that catches failures that can then be manually corrected so that no results are missed. That, of course, is covered in more detail in the eLab video. Lab results come in two flavors. There are those that can be posted against internal orders that have actually been ordered through Prognosis, or you can actually add a new result, perhaps in the case of an external doctor referring a patient to you, and the patient comes with labs that were already ordered externally, and you just want to review them with the patient and document your chart accordingly. You didn't do the order, but you can attach the result. Searching for results comes at two levels in the system. You can search at the system level by putting in a patient name or a status or a date or a vendor. You can also search at a patient level through the face sheet, the encounter table of content, and that, of course, would be the results only for that one patient. The status of the order will depend upon whether or not results can be applied. The default status would be O for ordered. However, there is a property that would allow you to accept results even if the status of the order was simply approved, meaning a requisition was never actually generated. Ultimately, once the results are posted, there is a workflow for the physician. We have what is called the supported events, as we cover in the system alerts and notifications video. The physician who ordered the lab will receive an alert based upon whether or not it is normal or abnormal. There will be an option there for the physician to assign an action task to the clinician. Also, results can be available on the patient portal if you so desire, and you can even individually hide certain tests from the patient if you would prefer to discuss it with them face-to-face. That is all decisions that you make internally and based on the way you configure your patient portal. And then finally, once the result is in the system, you can create reports or history matrices so that you can see how a patient is doing overall or even down to a specific test or panel. So these are the things we're going to look at in this video. I'm going to go ahead and open up my Prognosis. I'm going to open up my patient Daniel Hernandez initially. Now, some of what we're going to look at here is going to be intermingled. So all those scenarios I just bulleted out, I may not be taking in sequence because they overlap one another, but by the end of the video, you will have seen all of those different points that I just summarized. Now, I've opened up Daniel's chart because he happens to have a visit for today. So in conjunction with a visit, the doctor can very easily look at the patient's outstanding labs and results right here on the encounter table of content. So again, in conjunction with treating a patient, that's going to be your easiest avenue. And notice over my lab result option, I have a choice to look at it by individual order or by matrix. I'm going to initially start here with the by order. Now this is going to let you actually look at each order at a test by test basis and look at the data. Now the example that we're looking at here is structured data. You can see that for the glucose, the result was 145 with the minimum maximum range between 100 and 150. The HDL, the triglycerides, etc. Now notice that triglycerides is outlined in red. That indicates that it's abnormal. And if you look at the result value of 519, that exceeds the maximum level of 500. So that would actually trigger by giving an abnormal alert for the doctor in his inbox so that he can then follow the appropriate course of care, assign an action task to his nurse or whatever the situation is. Now notice how each test is underlined in a blue hyperlink. That is going to allow you to look at the matrix view of that specific test. So for instance, in the case of glucose, if we click on that, now in my case of Daniel Hernandez, this is his only time he's had glucose resulted, so we don't see any others beside it. If we look at another example, however, for instance, I'm going to go into Christian Gray's chart, and quickly we're going to look at his result in matrix view. And you'll notice here now that as a patient has different visits, starting on the far right, like we see here that Christian started coming this way back in 2011. Every time a specific test is read, you can see it here on the graph. If you notice the CBC, that's been ordered multiple times. So you can see how the results are fluctuating for a patient. And then based upon whether or not it is an HL7 interface, which we cover in more detail in the eLab video, there's different symbols you will see in here, such as when remarks are attached and so on. So at a matrix view, you get to drill it down to an even more granular level when it comes to the way you want to approach your care with that patient. So that's a lab result with structured data. I'm just going to stay on Christian's chart for right now. Notice there's an attached tab. This would be an example of the non-structured data, such as a copy of the diagnostic report. Maybe the results were scanned and they were not manually keyed into the system. So that's an example of both structured data or non-structured data. Now I'm going to go back to my example of Daniel Hernandez, and we're going to actually key a result. First of all, when you're trying to search for a result, let's say you're getting an inquiry, and the patient calls and says, "Are my results in yet?" Then you can go under the CPOE tab. This provides a system-level search, and go to lab results. And when you search for the patient's name, we'll put in Daniel Hernandez, we see there that he does have 2 labs. The test on May 4th is completed. Status C means all the results are there. The one from May 1st is a status O, which means it's been ordered, but no results have come in yet. So that's an indication that it's still in process at the lab. If you, of course, had sent the patient to a patient service center with a paper requisition, maybe the patient hasn't done the test yet. Or if they did, maybe the HL7 interface is a mismatch. And that is why you need to make sure that you're working the import log in those scenarios. In any event, the one with the O does not have a result yet. Let's choose a different scenario. Instead of a patient calling to verify the status, maybe you've actually got the fax. You just took the fax off of the machine and you realize it's the results for May 1st. Then we're going to go ahead and select that order for the basic metabolic panel. And since this is a fax, a non-structured data, we're going to manually key the results. Now, if you notice here, most of my tests here do not have a minimum maximum range, yet some of them do. In the case of manually keying results, unless you have predefined minimum maximum ranges within your laboratory test master, they will not be there. Now, in the case of the HL7 interface, they typically will come in with both the result as well as the minimum maximum ranges. We're just going to go ahead and enter some numbers here arbitrarily just to populate the screen. Of course, some of these examples aren't going to make a whole lot of sense since I'm not a nurse. Now notice that one is way above range, so it flagged the abnormal automatically because it is one where the range is defined. Whereas when I'm within range, it does not indicate abnormal. And I'm going to just show you here an example that you can also key text in case it is that type of a test and that does not come in numeric values. Now that I have entered the results, notice my status up here has changed now to complete from ordered. Had I only entered some of the results, this would have been a status of R results received until the final result makes it complete. Now all of these items have become hyperlinked so that I can see that matrix view. Of course, in my case of Daniel, they're not repetitive, so I'm not going to have any comparisons yet. But as he comes back in and has the same test, it will create a new entry on my chart. Now, I mentioned about the doctor getting an alert, so I'm going to log in quickly here as Dr. Cooper, and we're going to go in and look at his inbox messages. And we see right here for Daniel Hernandez, abnormal lab result. Because that result I just keyed had an abnormal, it gave him an alert that there's an abnormal lab result. Now, if we look down here at Christian Gray, his was normal. So the doctor will be notified either way, and that way he can decide how he wants to take action. If you notice here in his inbox, there is a Zoom icon. We cover this, of course, in the Working System Alerts and Notifications video. But if I just go ahead and click on this magnifying glass for Daniel, it's going to take me right to that abnormal test result. So now, as the doctor reviewing these labs that have automatically posted, and again, this was whether I manually posted it or if it had been an HL7 interface, I have an action button which means I can go in here and tell my nurse or my medical assistant what I need him to do. You notice it's already defaulting to the medical assistant I've assigned to myself. So this email will automatically go to Connor. If Connor's off or I'm working with a different nurse that day or a different medical assistant, or maybe I'm going to have my clinical desk follow up, whatever I so desire. My action codes are predefined at the system level. Maybe I want to see the patient because the abnormal is so severe. So I'm going to instruct Matthew and Amy and Connor to schedule an appointment. And if I want to add additional remarks, I will. I can go ahead and send the message, approve the results, indicate I've reviewed it, and update my medical record accordingly. So the physician has an opportunity of really doing a lot of resolution at this level by getting that system alert. And then if he has more results to review, he can just simply go back to his inbox and choose the next one. Now, since I resolved that one, it is no longer in bold font. I can go to the next one in bold font and do the same thing. Now, when it comes to these results, I'm going to go right back in there. If you are using the patient portal, one of the choices you have is to allow your patients to review their results online so they don't have to come into the office. That, of course, is a local choice. You can deactivate that if you don't want them to have that privilege, or if you want them to have the privilege for their basic labs, but in certain situations you don't want them to. Notice while I was reviewing this, I had an option of hide. Maybe I don't want the patient to see that because that number is so alarmingly high, the patient might freak out. And I would rather call them, which is why I just sent that action task to my clinicians. So I can say hide. That means when the patient logs in to see if the results are posted yet, they will see all of the others, but not that specific one. So in review of our lab test results and then prognosis, the data when posting a result can be either structured data or non-structured. That, of course, means that it could either be in the form of a numeric result within the context of a minimum-maximum range, or it could quite simply be positive-negative. In the case of non-structured, that would be an example where the diagnostic report has come in by fax or scan. Results can be manually keyed or automatically uploaded through an HL7 interface. If you're using the HL7 interface, there will be an import log that catches mismatches that you will need to manually resolve. Lab results could be internal against orders that were created within Prognosis, or external if you want to create a new result from an outside source where you did not initially order it, but you're reviewing the results. You have the ability of doing that ad hoc. You can search for result status, both at a system level under the CPOE module or at a patient level through the Encounter table of content. Lab status must be at a minimum approved. By default, should be in an ordered status in order for results to be applied, and that is determined by local preference and how you configure the system property. As a result is posted, it will trigger an alert to the ordering physician. He or she will get an alert in his or her mailbox and can then choose how to review and assign a further task if needed. And while doing that, if certain tests need to be hidden from the patient on the portal, you can indicate that. And as we saw, matrices are available once a result is posted. You can drill it down at a test level or at a patient to see how all of their labs are stacking up overall. That concludes this video within the series. Please click the appropriate link below for your next step. If you'd like to take a quiz, you will receive your results in real time directly on the screen so that you can see how well you've done. If you answer incorrectly, the system will prompt you with the correct response. In addition, a confidential email will be sent to the education team to help us better serve you with our educational offerings. Second, advance to the next video within the series you're currently in. And finally, return to the video library main page. As always, feel free to contact us through the Resource Center or email with any additional questions or comments.